Welcome back to video 8. I know up until now, if somebody would have mentioned giants in the Bible, you would have thought, well, what do they mean by that? Is this some kind of metaphor for something else? Is it some kind of mythological story? Stories that they tell their children and grandchildren, like be good, or the evil giants will come and take you away. Or was this actually part of the text that was real? Well, we're going to look into that today. But before that, these half human, half divine hybrid species were supposedly wiped off the face of the earth with the flood at the judgment of God during the days of Noah. But what happened? Why did they keep appearing? These giants keep appearing. These descendants of the Nephilim keep appearing throughout the Torah and all the way into David's day. Well, today we're going to look at that. What happened? How they showed up later. Last time we talked about the Watchers and their sin, illicit sex with human women, and of course the dispensing of forbidden knowledge that led to all kinds of corruption and evil and sin. So Genesis 6:4 says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men of old, men of renown. Well, wait a minute. How did they show up after the flood? What's going on there? They were supposed to all be wiped out. How did they show up later? Well, there's a lot of different theories. One of them, which I don't think really holds a lot of water, is, well, perhaps it was they came through the seed of Ham's wife. I don't think so. There's reasons for that, but more importantly, what I think happened here is found right in the text. If we dig a little deeper, especially into the original language. Now, what am I saying? When it says they were here also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, it's that word when. The Hebrew word, of course, is translated when, but it also can be translated as other things, such as whenever. So the Nephilim were around whenever the sons of God came into the daughters of men, whenever they had sex with them. So apparently, not all the sons of God sinned before Noah, but they did after. And this leads to the continuation of the demonic line, the demonic seed. And this is what gets God and his wrath starting to come forth, because he wants a pure race of people, because we were created in God's image and in his likeness. And these Nephilim, this unholy union, the spawn of this unholy union, is corrupting that. So what does the term Nephilim mean? Well, generally you're going to hear it said that, well, it comes from the Hebrew word nephal, and that means to fall or fallen ones. And I would say, yes, that's exactly right. Unfortunately, if we look at the Hebrew more morphologically, we'll see that the vowel points are a little bit different. For example, Ezekiel 30:27. Ezekiel's talking about the fallen ones who've fallen. And the word isn't Nephilim, it's Nophilim. Different vowel point, different word, and it means fallen ones. I understand the whole concept to be that Nephilim came from an Aramaic word. And it means giant, especially when the vowel points are put in just this way, it becomes the term giant. And this is what the translators of the King James Version translate it as. It doesn't say Nephilim in the King James, it says giants. The Septuagint also says giants. And of course, the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. So let's move on. We know that they're still around. The descendants of these Nephilim are still around. We know this because we see them in Numbers 13 when Moses is about to send the spies into the promised land. The spies go into the promised land. They go up and down throughout the whole land. They bring back this beautiful bounty of fruit. And the people are amazed. And the spies say, yeah, it's a beautiful land flowing with milk and honey. The produce is wonderful. And the people are rejoicing. And 10 of the spies say, but wait, there's more. We saw the Anakim, the descendants of the Nephilim there. And they were so big, they had these huge fortified cities. We looked like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked like grasshoppers in their eyes. And this wasn't just a perceptual issue of low self-esteem or low self-worth. They were freaked out. We can't go in. We cannot do this. We are not strong enough to take on these giants. And you remember what happened. 10 spies gave a bad report, 2 spies gave a good report, Joshua and Caleb. And Caleb gets up and says, wait a second. We have Yahweh on our side. He's with us. He'll do the fighting. The battle is his. And he says something very fascinating. He says, for their protection has left them. What the heck is he talking about? How does he know? What does the protection look like? What he's talking about is in the spiritual realm. First of all, God was present with the Israelites in the pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night. It was so big that all of Israel could see them. They provided shade during the day and heat during the night. And you know that in the desert, during the day, it gets pretty hot. The shade is welcome. And you also know that in the desert, that it gets pretty cold at night. And that pillar of fire was very welcome. And he says that it was providing shade through the pillar of cloud. Well, the word for protection refers to shade. Caleb could see that the protection of the inhabitants of the promised land had fled in the presence of the people of God. And then he says something interesting, and I'm going to quote it in modern vernacular. He says, don't worry about these guys. We will eat their lunch. He technically says there will be bread for us, but you get the point. With God, remember this always, that with God, one is a majority. Joshua and Caleb knew this. They knew that there was no amount of forces on the other side that could stand up to Yahweh. They saw what he did in Egypt. They saw what he did in the Red Sea. They saw all his power and his great works and his deliverance and his mighty, awesome arms stretched out in front of the Israelites and how he prepared a way in the wilderness. And they're saying, guys, look to him. So we have these clans of giants. Some places, as in Numbers here, they're the clan of the Anakim, the sons of Anak, great mighty people, giants. And there's also the Rephaim. Now we'll read about Rephaim and we'll see it in Deuteronomy 3 with Og, king of Bashan. He was the last of the Rephaim in that region. It says that he was a pretty big guy. He had a bed, or perhaps a sarcophagus, his final resting place, that was 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. He was a big guy. Didn't matter. This new group of Israelites, you see, the first group that whined and complained in the wilderness, God said, you're not going to enter the promised land. Your kids will. And these kids were weaned on the greatness of God. They were weaned on the knowing God as that man of war, the deliverer, the one who is with them, who will never leave them nor forsake them. And they went in and they said, he's just a man, we'll kill him. They did. So we get to the conquest. 40 years have passed since that generation passed away. They're moving up the east side of the Jordan. They come and they reach the land of Bashan, where Og, the king of Bashan, and all his armies resided. And of course, Bashan is in the shadow of Mount Hermon. Again, ground zero for these evil spirits. The Israelites dispatch Og and his nations, like his cities, and then they move across to the Jordan, where God miraculously parts the Jordan. They walk through on dry land, and they get to Jericho. A huge, well-fortified city. Why are the walls so big and fortified? Because they were protecting big people. So they move into the promised land, and that's where the conquest begins. And this is where we get all this stuff about God is so genocidal. He's a murderous maniac. And people are missing the point. You see, not everybody in the conquest got destroyed. It says a lot of them got dispossessed. But the ones who did get destroyed were all the members of the giant clans. This unholy seed could not inhabit sacred space, so they had to be destroyed. It was warfare, it was hardcore. But make no mistake, it had to happen because God could not tolerate this impure seed in his sacred space. Which brings us to one of the more famous stories in the Bible, one that everyone, and I mean everyone, not just Christians, not just churchgoers, but everyone, the story of this great underdog coming to meet this monstrous, powerful enemy. The enemy is well armed, well girded with armor, and this intrepid little hero, all he's got is a bag of rocks and a sling. Yes, I'm talking about David and Goliath. Don't know how tall Goliath was. It says in the Masoretic text that he was like 9.5 feet. Dead Sea Scrolls put him a little shorter than that. He was an imposing figure. So imposing that it says that the Israelite army was in total fear of Goliath as he was taunting them, as he was mocking the living God. Their eyes were somewhere other than on God. They were looking at their own strength and their own weakness and the strength and power of this giant. And of course, Goliath, we're told, was a descendant of the Rephaim from Gath. There was a little stronghold of giants down in what's now Gaza. So David is undaunted by this giant. He says he's mocking God. This is not acceptable. I'll fight him. He goes, gets permission from Saul to go fight him. And what happens? As he's walking towards the field, he stops at this dried up stream bed and he picks up 5 stones. 1 for Goliath and 4 for his brothers. Now, he wouldn't need the other 4, but he did need the 1. And with that stone, David, our underdog hero, flies into battle, telling Goliath that the battle is the Lord's. Dare you mock the armies of the living God? How dare you mock our Redeemer, our Deliverer? And he's going to give you over to me this day. It was a quick battle. David got his sling and fired it at Goliath. Nailed him right in the head. And that was the end of it. David ran over, jumped on him, pulled out his sword, and sliced his head off. The Israelites were jubilant. They were overwhelmed by this good news. The Philistines, on the other hand, went from being proud and cocky and arrogant to, we got to get out of here for fear of our lives. So the spiritual significance of this, David's victory over Goliath, it was a physical reenactment, a foreshadowing, if you will, of the divine reversal, where the chosen seed of humanity, in this case David, crushes the head of the corrupt seed of the serpent / watchers, Goliath. I want you to keep in mind that one of the epithets, one of the titles, messianic titles of Jesus was Son of David. There are reasons for that, but one that often gets overlooked was this story and how David seemed to have authority in vanquishing these spiritual forces of darkness in the physical realm. So the Nephilim were giants. They were a hybrid offspring of the Watchers. Their presence in Canaan was a spiritual pollution that had to be cleansed, a task that was begun by Joshua, completed by David and his mighty men. Up next, we're going to look at the third great rebellion. This is embarrassing. When we talk about the Tower of Babel. So that's it for this video. Please stay tuned, and we will be back and talk about what happened at Babel with the confusion of languages